Well, this is set in the New Mexico desert. I was 19, I think, and I was driving, and I bought this. I traded my old Honda for a van, and I ended up just driving the country, working, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I had no aim, no direction, and no goals. Just not much has changed. But this is, I'll just jump into it. In a van, driving. So I'll go up to here, 19 years old. So like 2 years ago. The city took forever. I didn't like the look it had. I found a byway going south and I drove through the southwest. The impossible mesas, the red plateaus painted far back atop a beautiful brown, deadly, lazy scheme. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. I drove on, listening to an old country station, the songs taking me back to the coffee table of my childhood, to my father drinking coffee and smoking, talking to my mother before the sun came out, and he had to leave to roof houses. I was 6 or 7 years old. My mother would sometimes stand behind him in her bathrobe and pop the heat blisters across his back. I remembered his tattoos. He'd done some time. The ink was deep green. He explained to me then that it was India ink, the kind they had in prison. One on his forearm was an unfinished dagger. Another was my mother's name across his knuckles. I never thought he'd come to blows with me, the way he did when I was 17, or that I'd knock him on his back at 19. But then I never thought I would be 19 and driving aimlessly across the desert, my mother in her coffin, my father completely wasted, a junkie dying away to dust on the streets of West Phoenix. You know, typical thoughts every 19-year-old should have. I drove on for a few hours, cutting through back roads and access roads. For the sheer hell of it, I turned around and took the same roads north, going further upstate. I had no plan. I was flying in youth, totally free. A mile outside of Farmington, the van died. I jumped out and checked the oil. It was fine. I tried to start it again. It kicked over, made it a few more blocks, then started smoking. It rattled and bucked into a gas station on the outskirts. The sun was fading early. I parked on the side of the station and popped the hood. I was as much a mechanic as I was a jet pilot. It's true, that engine looked like it was upside down and backwards. When I popped, I don't know. I mean, you know, pot lot. You roll the dice. You take your chances. And as you'll find out soon, when that music stops, you pay the fucking fiddler. Okay. Get some coffee in me. Ooh. All right. An old Navajo walked out of the station eating an orange. I nodded to him and smiled. He said nothing. He stood next to me under the hood. What is it? His voice was angered, aggravated, and aggravating. I don't know. What happened? I told him. He walked away slowly and came back with another. He got behind the wheel and cranked it. His buddy stayed under the hood. I walked inside the station and bought a drink. They were standing over the engine, laughing. His buddy had one tooth in his head. I asked the first one what was wrong with it. He wiped his hands down his shirt and shook his head, smiling. It's very bad. I stared at his friend. He nodded and smiled. I looked at his tooth. How bad? The other one answered. He was the boss. Had gaskets blown. Much money. How much money? We'll do it for $900. I only had $600 on me, I told him. Nope. Fix it here, we tow it to the junkyard. I had the extra key in my wallet. All right, fix it here. I asked him how long it would take. 1 solid day. I took my bike out and rode into town, into that place. The car lots there were useless. They either had nothing I could afford or anything I would trust. I rode back. They had the van on the lift in the garage. I found the boss again. Listen, I really only have $600. Can't we do something here? I mean, we're both people. He scowled. You're not my people. $900. That's a good deal. Somewhere else you'd pay twice as much. Well, I don't have it. He looked me up and down. Where do you live? I shook my head. He smiled. Maybe you can work here for the money. Where? He laughed. I'll make the call. Job's hard. Very hard. Maybe you'll quit. I asked him what it was. He uttered one word, digging. He told me I could sleep in the van until I paid it off, but he would charge me a little extra for rent. I thought quickly about catching a bus, but there was nowhere I wanted to go. I couldn't hitch a ride out with my bike and my things. Arizona was not an option. I told him to make the call. I slept in the van that night in the garage. It was still dark when one of the Indians banged on the door. Get up, time for work. I had the sheet of paper with directions and set out on my bike. It was a 4-mile ride through the dusty roads and paths. I saw the sight, a long, long line of Indians on their knees with narrow shovels trenching into the ground, a truck going slowly in reverse with a giant spool of cable they laid carefully into the trench. They were shirtless and moving quickly, and the foreman screamed at them. They were an endless line ripping a tear in the desert, the line of dark red backs and elbows moving like a long machine. I was my soul after death when I was standing at the gates of hell. I found the lead foreman and told him who I was. He yelled, "You're late." I tried to explain. He threw a shovel in my hands. 3 feet deep and 2 wide, now. I squeezed in between 2 big Indians. The foreman ran up and nudged me with his boot. "No, you bring up the front." He walked me up to the front of the line. It was a long walk. The Navajos peered at me with my shovel, and they jeered me. At the front of the line, the foreman pushed me into the lead. I'd had it with him. I turned and held my shovel to swing at him. He jumped back and pulled out a long blade. I yelled at him, "Fuck you." The line burst into laughter. The foreman laughed with them. "Just dig, white boy. You'll quit before an hour." He put the knife back in his boot and walked away. I dropped to one knee and saw the ditch. I would work the day, then sneak out with the van before the Indians came back to the shop. I began digging. The other workers laughed. Their laughter made me angry. I dug furiously for an hour. I made sure to stay in front of them, to beat them with the widening gap. One of them yelled at me to slow down. I heard his friend, "Don't worry, he'll get tired." I thought of all the things that sickened me. I found a reservoir of hatred inside my arms. I dug on. 3 or so hours passed. It was time for everyone to drink. It was a long wait for the water ladle. There was a huge steel trough, and we all lined up to drink from that ladle. When my turn came, I took 2 or 3 gulps. Then another foreman grabbed it. "That's too much, white boy." Everybody laughed. They still had 10 minutes. They found corners of the shade by the trailer and sat. I walked back to the ditch and kept at it. They kept yelling at me to take a break. The foreman told them to keep quiet, that they were disgusted that a white boy was making them look so bad. I kept digging. I was yards out in front of them. They had to cut the break short. They were moving as fast as they could, but I had plenty of hatred in me. At one point, the foreman blew his whistle and we stopped. He ran over with his tape measure and stuck it in their part of the ditch. "Too damn shallow." A big worker stood up and looked at me. He ran his finger under his throat. I asked him if he was tired, and the line howled. I kept going, faster and faster, delirious from the heat. My skin was burnt. After the next hour, everybody hated me. I didn't care. I would never see them again. We worked until dusk. At the trailer where I had my bike chained, the tires were knived, and they were watching me. I paid them no mind, picked up my bike and carried it on my shoulder up over the hill where they couldn't see. Then I set it down and collapsed. I watched the hot and dead sky turn circles over my body. I remember the pier in California, meeting Lynch, my genius painter buddy from Vegas, and Otto, his younger protege, who had just moved to Vegas from Arkansas, and they were in town by the pier, and we rode our bikes all day practicing new tricks in front of the ocean. I remembered back further to jumping on a Greyhound bus from Phoenix to the beach in Venice with $300 in my pocket, the first time I'd left home. I liked it there, and I lied about my age to get my first construction job I had found in the paper while drinking coffee in front of the ocean with my first girlfriend. She was 7 years older than I was, with plenty of neurosis. Her name was Kim, and she lived by the beach there in Venice. In 6 months, she became the enemy, and I escaped her one morning while she was asleep. On the hot dirt, I thought forward from her to a beach house where I had been a renter, living with an after-hours alcoholic and her lazy eye and her husband, Cliff, who was a psychologist and latently homosexual, which occurred to me on the hot dirt was the reason he always had a pipe in his mouth. I remember leaving there and my laundry getting stolen from the dryers in San Diego, and I remembered going to jail in Tijuana and being beaten over and over. But mostly I remembered nothing, and it was supposed to be dusk, but the sky wouldn't budge. I heard the rumbling of tires coming behind me. I picked up my bike and kept going. They blew by, yelling, hooting, flipping me the bird, leaving me in a cloud of dust. I set it down and walked it. A mile before the station, the two mechanics pulled up in an old car. The boss nodded at me. "We fixed your van." I stared ahead and nodded. I felt him look at his buddy and smile, then look back to me. "See you in the morning." I nodded ahead. They wouldn't see me in the morning. They wouldn't see me again. The van wasn't in the garage windows. I walked around back and dug the key from my wallet. I threw my bike in the side door and sat behind the wheel. I could see the last traces of sunlight crashing into the desert. Then it was dark. I turned the key. It purred. They had done a good job. I crawled them back and laid on the couch. The van had no wheels. They had it set up on jacks. That night I slept on my stomach. I passed out right away, woke up about 5 hours later. I was stiff and sore. The flesh on my knees was raw. I didn't know when the sun would appear. I found the road and walked. Every step I took, my pants would hit the exposed skin on my knees and stick to them. I walked, thinking if this was the way it would be, then I would show them. I would show them all. I found a strong vigor within that thought. I moved on, tried like hell to ignore my body. An old truck coasted past me, then slowed to the shoulder. An old Indian with a white ponytail and a cowboy hat. He asked me if I wanted to ride. He lived right near the site. I asked him what time it was. He didn't know. He asked me what I was doing here. I told him. He shook his head. "Good luck." There was something calm to his voice and was deep and casual. He lit a smoke and shook one loose for me. "Don't smoke." "Good for you. Don't start." We drove by a billboard advertising the new Jeep Cherokee. He smiled. They totally obliterate the Indian nation in the name of fucking automobile after it. I laughed. He looked over. "You got any native in you?" "Who knows? Just a mutt, huh?" "Yes." He dropped me off. I worked the day through. By the end of the week, I was adjusted to the labor, and the workers gave up on hazing me. Once or twice, my friend would see me walking and give me a lift in. We had weekends off if we chose them. I worked. I found out that I was making minimum wage, which at the time was $3.35 an hour. Weekends were overtime. If I worked the maximum, I would pull down around $240 a week after taxes. The Indians charged me $20 a week for rent. I survived on food from the station, mostly orange juice and fruit and candy bars. I bought a battery-powered clock with an alarm at a drugstore. In bed by 9, up at 3. Walking to work took an hour. Into my second week, I was allowed to ride to and from the site with the boys in the pickups, and that gave me an extra 2 hours a day. My sister in Illinois offered to bail me out, but I couldn't take her money. I hated the work more and more, but I felt a bond with the desert, with the deadliness of it. At night, I would write in my journal and fall asleep with no trace of sound around me. I tried to take a weekend off, but I felt bored with everything and went back to the ditch. Payday was once a month, paid to the day the checks were issued. I started the job on the third day of the new pay period. I came to stand at peace with the Navajos, though we hated each other. I was a symbol of war and death and dominance to them. To me, they were just more assholes I had to see every day in order to make money. They were no different to me than anyone else. I wasn't responsible for their Holocaust. I wasn't even alive. They dealt with me the way someone deals with a fly they cannot kill. I found a nice mindset out in the desert, with the job, the boys, the heat, the nothingness. It would do me no good to bitch about it or take pity on myself. There was no time for it. I was a vessel for that cable, for the phone company. I took it. I had no choice. One day on the job, one of the Indians dug too carelessly and broke open one of the lower cables. They were fiber optic lines from the phone company. I learned through another laborer's broken English and hand movements that if you shined a flashlight through one end of a 5,000-foot section, the light would come out of the other end. He had said it was expensive to repair, something like $400,000 a minute or an hour or whatever he'd meant, for a specialist to come out. We were laying a different type of line next to the fiber optic that was already in the ground. The guy hit it and cut it open with a shovel. He was called off the line. Work was halted for a few hours. I never saw him again. I remember it because he tried to point the finger at me. I was working in front of him. He was scared. He called the foreman over and nodded at me. "White boy cut wire." I looked at the foreman and shook my head, kept digging. The worker tried to come at me, but I stopped him with my shovel, laid it hard across his shins. Another Indian stepped in and defended me to the boss, an Indian I'd never talked to. I didn't know why he did it. I guess I had earned a shred of respect out there. I was out of myself there, in a certain zone, a haze. Even nailing the Indian with my shovel was in careless, slow motion. Everything that happened out there only drifted by with little or no importance. Everything that happened was secondary to the ditch. Payday came. I hadn't showered in just a few days under a month, save washing off with the hose at the station. My check was pathetic compared to the work I had done. My rent was $80. That with the money I owed on the van would leave me with $60 extra. I would leave with a little under what I'd rolled in with. After everyone got their checks, they had to go back to work. I walked off the site and into town to cash in. Back at the station, the boss opened the register. I told him to get the wheels on before I paid him. "What, you don't trust us?" I didn't say anything. He nodded at me. "Half the money first." "No." "He'll put the wheels on. I'll watch you." "Just put the fucking wheels on." He whistled to his worker, and that's how they called each other, that whistle. I was utterly sick of that whistle. Out back, he removed the jacks one by one after the wheels were bolted down. They surrounded me. I dug into my pocket and pulled the money out. They eyed the roll. I held my hand out. "The keys, now." The boss dropped the keys into my hand. I peeled off 980 and handed it to him. He looked at me squarely and walked away. His worker followed him, and he watched the money over his shoulder. I fired up the Dodge and pulled out, feeling more indifferent than anything. I headed down the same back roads. I stopped in Tucson. Downtown there was some sort of carnival. I was rugged and dark. I fit right in. For the first time in my life, I wanted a beer. The compulsion came from nowhere, hit me from above. The first barmaid asked for ID, so I went next door. The place was dark and seedy. I sat in the back. It was a dismal bar. The barmaid didn't sweat me about my age, and I ordered my first beer. I stayed in the bar all night and wrote in my journal. After every glass, the words got better. They grew into characters, trading lines. I wrote my first pages of short story dialogue, my first poems. After a few more, I couldn't write. Only 4 men had entered the bar the whole night. After last call, I floated to my van and fell asleep. I awoke heavy and wet. My head was full. It wasn't like the small headaches I had gotten from the wine in the past. No, there was weight to this one. Every small noise was amplified grossly. I could remember the old woman bringing me beer constantly. I pissed next to one of my wheels, watching the sunrise. I could hear it rising, crackling. I found my shirt. At a gas station, I bought some aspirin and washed them down. Up the highway to Denny's, I drank coffee and got ready to read the journal. It was nice and cool in there. I looked out and saw my van. My head was still pounding from the beer. I felt sick and remorseful for drinking as much as I drank, but I also felt a little proud. I read the drunken pages. After I forced down breakfast, I hit a coffee shop and got my bike squared away with a tube and new tires. $35, over 10 hours of digging. I watched my hands as I flipped through the bills. They were darker, larger, and hardened, carved throughout with veins and drying cuts. Another feeling of pride. So when this book dropped, and I remember there was I was in New York City, I think, and there was I was in Midtown. Oh, there's a cardinal right outside my window. It was a blood red cardinal. I think it's a cardinal. Well, anyway, sorry. The New York event. So a guy was talking to me about this book a long time ago. Feels like a century ago, and we were in Club 7A, and he goes, "Yeah, that part about the Navajos, man." He goes, "I like the way the way you just like, you capture these moments. How do you land your material? How do you get your material?" Something like that. I forgot what he asked me, and I didn't say anything. I'm like, well, it's, you just get in a zone, and you work, and you just get into these modes, right? And he said, well, obviously it was an experience, right? It was real, but you dramatized it for for the book. And I go, no, actually, I said, in reality, it was a 3-month job. But I shortened it to 3 weeks to make it more digestible for the book, because 3 months there, that closely to the beginning of the book, like, it was like chapter 3, I think that was, or 2 or 3, no, end of chapter 2, but so they're long chapters. And so I didn't want to make it 3 months. It would have been just too much, too fast. So he just kind of looked at me and like, oh, okay. Next. But, it's, like earlier I alluded to, it's not normal. That wasn't a normal life for a 19-year-old, a teenager, And so I think that having to deal with that, I look back now, though, I'm like, I feel kind of blessed and cursed. I hear people say, I'm blessed or have a blessed day. I mean, that's nice to hear, I guess, but the thoughts and prayers, blessed and blah, blah, blah. I really think that when you, and I think too, I was talking to somebody recently about what's going on in the States politically. I'm not going to get into this, but I said, I think the problem is you put these little fucking blue-haired maniacs in a hard job for a week. They'll change their tune. And so I think a lot of what we have is just precious sissies across the entire, so that's my opinion. But reading this now, looking back on it, I wonder if, God, I hope other kids that age are going through that. I really do. It doesn't necessarily build character as it creates character. So, yeah. Let's see. I drove from New Mexico back to Phoenix automatically, not even thinking about it. So I'll just stop there with the read. It goes into going to his house, and his like con artist brother was there with his own van, and he would come to see the family a lot and stay with them, burn them, and leave. And his sister always took everybody in, like mine did. Always took us in. I mean, I never did that. I never burned her or anything, but he did. I never understood that. You know what I mean? It's like you're gonna burn a bridge you must know you're going to need to use again, and then somebody not only has to see you coming, but love you and hate you enough to build the bridge while you wait for him. And then you come back across, you burn it again. It was a really morbid process, and I don't want to speak unkindly of the dead, because he passed away. And his wife, who I call his shadow in the book, they were like a white trash Bonnie and Clyde. But, to coin a Southern phrase I hear a lot every day, God bless him. God bless him. I looking back, he just did what he thought he had to do. And as wrong as he was, I think he was a little bit slow, socially. Not like he was retarded, but he was like a little slow. It was a little out there. But I don't know. I think that, if he would have been retarded, that would have been lovable. I'd have been like, okay, you're closer to God or Buddha or the universe or fucking whatever, fucking blah blah blah. I don't know. I don't have a belief system, but I just know that sometimes when you get caught in these worlds, when you're writing a book, especially one like this, like when it's like autobiographical, you can get so lost in the truth of how you feel that you can lose perspective for the book itself. And so I tried not to do that in this book, meaning I tried to not lose perspective. This was a bloody, raw, bloody's the day you were born type of novel that I had no regard or care for the person who would read it, and not in a bad way. I'm not trying to be a dick, but I didn't expect anyone to ever read this. I just wrote this. It was like a long letter about 10 years of my life. Really more. Really 13 years, come to think of it, but the first 3 were chopped out for the final book. So, I don't know, but anyway, that was the chapter 2, I think. Let me see. Yeah, that was part of chapter 2 of March of Time and Skin. And that's it. So I'm going to get out of here. Thank you for listening, if you have, and I'll talk to you in the brand new video. And as always, take good care.